All right, man. So it looks like we got some breaking, shocking news coming out of Texas. So we've got some fresh new polls coming out showing that Kamala Harris is actually continuing to make more gains in the state of Texas. Texas is obviously a state where, it's been trending blue. It's supposed to have been the blue state. But what we have seen is large margin shifting despite it not turning blue. It went from about a 9 point loss to about a 5.5 point loss, so almost halving. And we'll look at the numbers. You can arguably say that it was actually a larger than 9 point margin back in 2016 because Gary Johnson took a lot of votes, so arguably more. But sort of rewinding a little bit back to 5 days ago, right? So this is August 22nd. It says Harris shrinks Trump's lead in Texas, Allred within striking distance of Cruz poll finds. So it says Vice President Kamala Harris trails former President Donald Trump by 5 percentage points in Texas, shaving off nearly half the Republican nominee's one-time advantage over President Joe Biden from earlier this year, according to a new poll released Thursday. The survey, conducted earlier this month by the University of Houston's Hobby School of Public Affairs, is among the first to measure where things stand in Texas since Biden dropped his re-election bid last month. In June, the same pollster found that Trump led Biden by nearly 9 percentage points. So this was like 5 days ago, almost a week ago, where we saw the first surge happening, where she basically slices it in half, the 9 point lead into half, only down to 5, and then also Colin Allred is within just 2 points. So the Allred seat is super important too because the Allred seat can actually hold the Senate as well. But we actually got some new fresh polling, so potential second surge here. So here we have these new polls coming from PPP, Public Policy Polling. So this is sponsored by a Democratic pollster. So it says 2024 Texas GE. So in the head-to-head poll, we have Trump 49% to Harris's 44%, which is +5. And then we have this huge bombshell here. So it's the first poll that we have yet to see really in a while, generally even with Biden. But really with Kamala Harris, this is the first time we've seen a lead that's within 3 points. So this is huge because this is the first poll we've actually seen where she's only down 3 points. So Trump is at 45%, Harris is at 42%, Kennedy is at 6%, West is at 1%, and Stein is at 0%. So Kennedy is, unfortunately, he's going to be off the ballot in Texas. I will have another video talking about the states he's going to be on the ballot and where he's not. He's trying to suspend his campaign in all the swing states. We'll kind of go over in that video whether or not he's able to do all of that, so check out that video on the channel as well. But he will be off the ballot here. But nonetheless, this is super important because it's actually the first poll, and most importantly, we want to look at shifts and how margin shifts are going. And so for this head-to-head poll, we can look at the previous Texas polls. So the Texas poll that's being referenced here, where she shrunk it in half into 5 points, that was actually a poll that had all of the third-party candidates in it as well. This is the YouGov poll, right, where Trump was +5, Harris was at 45, Trump at 50, Kennedy at 2, Stein at 1, and Oliver at 1. So the 5 point lead was not in a head-to-head poll, it was in a poll with all of the candidates. So when we compare directly the two polls that have all the candidates in them, what you can see is there's a 2 point increase from the previous poll. So when we look at the two polls that actually have all the candidates in it, Kamala Harris has surged 2 points forward. We're comparing different pollsters here, but we don't have that many polls to look at, so we're kind of strapped a little bit here. But when we look at the two actually polls with all of the candidates in it, she's actually surged 2 points. So what this tells us is, regardless of what's going on with Kennedy, she's clearly surging. We can also see here when we compare the last available poll that was head-to-head. We can see the active vote poll was the last head-to-head poll. It's actually the first one we have between Harris and Trump. Trump was +7, 53 to 47. And here we can see in this head-to-head poll, Harris is at 44 to Trump's 49, which is Trump +5. So that's a 2 point surge in the head-to-head numbers. So similarly, you can see a 2 point surge from head-to-head as well as a 2 point surge from the full poll with everybody in it, right? So this is, regardless, definitely a surge happening. This is 44-49, which is actually pretty close in terms of being, we're still in August. There's a lot of time and a lot of ground to cover. Obviously, Harris is not going to get 44%. But if you look at the 2016 results here, she loses by a little, like 9.2%. But Gary Johnson pulled 3.2%. So in my opinion, it's more of a de facto sort of 10+ point victory, honestly, 10 to 11 point victory if he hadn't run. And then, we see in 2020, it's about a 5.5 point lead. And so it's basically halved, if not more. So clearly there's a large shift. And what we are able to see is, We don't want to just look at polls. We want to look at trends. We want to look at demography data, etc. Demographic data. So we can see from this map versus this one, you can see there's a flip going on, right? So a couple of major areas actually got flipped, major counties. So you can see in this Austin area here, there's a lot of Californians that are moving away from California because it's too expensive. They're moving to places like Texas, North Carolina. They go to the blue areas here. So we can see here in Hayes County, Trump wins by 47.2 to 46.3. And then we can see in 2020, it's a massive shift, 54.4 to 43.6. Of course, is because there's more people moving in there. And this is massive because shifting your numbers by this much in these kinds of areas, these counties with more votes, and this one doesn't even have anywhere close to as many votes we're going to talk about, is really huge. Whereas, like, let's say you boost your number by 5 to 10% in a smaller, county with not that many votes, it doesn't really matter. Another one, Williamson County, Donald Trump is 51.9 and Hillary's 42. And think about it, he flipped this county, which is insane. She was down 10 points, and he flips it. So he gets it 49.7 to 48.3. And there's so many votes in that county, it's a huge shift. So we can see the Austin area flooding with Democrats into the area. And so those 3 counties are massive. Also, if you look at Dallas County here, we do a comparison here, 65.1 for Biden. And then if we look at Dallas County here, Hillary only got 61.1. So he boosted numbers by about 4%, which is huge. 4% in this county is massive because there's so many fudging votes in it. There's like 800,000, almost a million votes. So 4% ends up giving you a lot, right? Also, another one that flipped blue, Tarrant County, also in the Fort Worth, Dallas area, flipped blue as well. So 49.3 for Biden compared to, Trump getting, this is a crazy flip too. So you can see this here, right? And there's so many votes, 52.2, 43.5, so almost a 10-point deficit. And he ends up flipping the county in favor of him, 49.3 to 49.1. It's like a 10% margin shift, which is huge. The Parker County, which has Fort Worth in it, is still red for some reason. But the other big shifts, Denton County as well as Collin County, really large shifts. So if we look at Denton here, you can see 57.7 to 37.5. And then if we take a look here, it's 53.3 to 45.2, so a far smaller margin. And then here it's 51.4 to 47.1, so about 4.5%. And here we see, this is just ridiculous. This is ludicrous, right? In Collin County, this is just, excuse my language, fucking ridiculous, right? Like RZA on like a Soul Paul, this is fucking ridiculous, right? So, we have like this 17% margin ends up going down to like 4 points, right? Which is crazy. So we can see Fort Worth, Dallas area is getting run through with a bunch of Californians. I think the Austin area as well. El Paso area also going bluer, 66.8 compared to, the El Paso area for Hillary, 69.1. So actually, I guess that one actually went down. In El Paso, we can see these areas are also blue, and some of these areas going more blue. Houston is lagging a little bit. Harris County not really moving that much. I don't know if there's not as many people moving. It's only like 2% there. And then, if you have in this area, Fort Bend, 54.7. This is a solid move, but they're not moving as much as the other areas. So Houston, I don't know if they're not getting as many of the transplants, but really huge. We can see these areas are being flipped, and we know that there's evidence that there's happening. The same thing is still happening. So this article says Texas gained more people than any other state in the last year. Texas grew by nearly 500,000 people in the past year, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, but it was South Carolina that led the nation with this population growth. Texas population grew more than any other state in the country in the last year by nearly 500,000 people, according to the recent estimates from the U.S. Census Bureau. Of the 1.6 million people the nation gained between July 2022 and July 2023, nearly 30% are Texas residents. So almost a third of all the people that the nation gained were Texas residents. And it says the 473,453 people added to Texas population during that period contributed to the state's high growth rate of 1.6%, which is the third highest country behind South Carolina and Florida. Due to Texas size, the second most populous state in the country, the high growth rate contributed to broader population increase in the South. And so what it ends up talking about here is, it says the population growth is centered in Texas cities. Nearly 70% of Texas residents live in the 4 large metro areas, which include Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston, San Antonio, and Austin, according to estimates from the Texas Demographic Center. And this is just between 2022 and 2023. Imagine how much it is between 2023 and now in the election, and then also between, the 2020 election and between the 2022 year, right? So there's hundreds of thousands of people moving into the state of Texas. So what's likely going to end up happening is you're going to have a continued surge. I find it almost impossible that you can't build on this margin based on the way demographic changes are moving. And then also, we know that there's evidence that Kamala Harris is probably going to do better with the Latino vote than Trump or than Biden did. He got 59. Interestingly enough, with Biden, actually, he matched his national numbers, whereas Hillary severely underperformed by 4 points, or 5 points, actually. So I'm not sure what happened with that one. But also, we know that Kamala Harris is really stemming a lot of like first-time voters with young people and young black people, etc. So the polls are also likely going to miss that and underestimate her as well. And he ended up overperforming pretty significantly in the poll numbers. Back in 2020, he got underestimated by like 4 points almost, which is like disgustingly massive, like 3.5. But, for a poll like the one that we saw earlier where it already has him, sort of at like the, 49% and stuff, he's probably not going to overperform by that much. And Harris isn't going to get 44. That's going to continue to grow as well. So what I think is probably going to end up happening is I don't think Texas is going to turn blue this election cycle, but I think it will get close within two or three. Just even you can look at the basic way that the things are going. It doesn't really take like a Nostradamus to predict this, to be honest. We can just look at the demographic data. We can look at the trend shift from population from the election from 2016 to 2020. But the thing is, kind of like the shoot for the stars, hit the moon thing. I don't know if that's a saying. You kind of like go really high. You might not hit it, but you get kind of close. And I don't know if you can guess what that is, but that's actually Allred winning the seat against Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz is doing pretty weak in the polls right now. He seems to be a very weak incumbent. We can see his numbers as well. In a lot of these polls, he's at like 44, 47, which is like hilariously low. He has a couple of 50s, but a lot of these are just in the 40s, which indicates he's really, really weak. So if he's polling in the 40s, you can just like beat him off and just kind of stem your own vote. You can beat yourself off, and just be able to beat him. When he's over 50, it's going to get really hard to be able to do that. But so maybe you can't flip that sort of +5 margin that he has, but maybe you can flip the Cruz margin where it's only 2. And Beto got severely underestimated as well. He ended up overperforming by about 4 points. There wasn't much underperformance for Cruz though, so presumably we can kind of expect like a similar margin for Cruz. But for Beto, he was heavily underestimated. So Texas definitely surging. We can just see the numbers. It's obvious what's happening, right? So, she's down to 3. This is our first poll we've seen with +3 in a while for Texas. I mean, even if you just look through the past, it's been like decades basically. Just look at this. This is the last one, like +4 back in February, +4. So that's February, bro. February, my dog. February. So it's uncharted territory, and you can see with the Biden numbers, just a clear shift in the numbers. You can just see with your own 2 eyes. Just super basic. So Kamala surging. I expect the surge to continue. I think that she's going to lose the state probably by 2 to 3 points, but there might even be some surprises where it becomes within 1. The population growth is just insane. They're all going to blue areas. She's going to tap into those people, and then the polls are going to miss a lot of her voters, man. They're going to miss them. A lot of them are first-time voters. Check out my video on that as well. There's also a video on that as well. So she's surging for sure, and it'll just be really interesting to see what happens.